We'll invite Felicity Milner to now speak about how the laws work. Felicity is the Principal Solicitor at the Environment Defender's Office. She has started in the Victorian branch of the EDO. She started in April. Prior to that, she was at the EDO in Sydney. And before that, Felicity worked in a private firm specialising in local government planning and environment law. I'll invite Felicity now to grab this microphone and go through the offences with you to let you know what they mean and what they do.
Respond to government proposals, and we also do some proactive policy work to try and change the law and to make it better. And we do community legal education, which includes attending seminars like tonight. So that's the EDO. So the two new offences that Lisa and Julia that we were talking about were introduced into the Electricity Industry Act in late last year. The two sections in question are sections 79 and 80 of that act. They were introduced by the Electricity Industry Amendment Critical Infrastructure Bill. And as Julia said, it was introduced basically in response to a series of protest actions around targeting coal-fired power stations and coal mines and facilities that supply those power stations and mines, and it was in response to that. So the actual two provisions apply to critical electricity infrastructure. Critical electricity infrastructure, as this is the definition from the Act, includes a critical generation facility or a related coal mine or a substation, terminal station, distribution station or switchyard. So they're the sort of smaller affiliated electricity infrastructure. A critical generation facility is basically a power station. You can see there that it's got a generation capacity. It's got to be over that specific capacity for it to be counted as a critical generation facility. But I mean, I'm no expert in these matters, but I understand that most coal-fired power stations will certainly be over and above that limit, and that you don't have to actually be a very big or critical coal-fired power station or power generation facility of any kind to be generating more than that amount of energy. And it also obviously includes water facilities associated with those facilities. A related coal mine means a coal mine from which coal is extracted for use in a critical generation facility, and the water facilities as well. The thing I would say about this definition is, if any of you are aware of Hazelwood and Loyang, it's obviously quite obvious that the coal mines are quite directly associated with the power station, and they directly supply the coal to the power station. But I think the definition is a bit broader than that, so it might actually include coal mines that aren't sort of adjacent and have that kind of direct coal relationship, coal supply relationship. So that's something to be aware of, I think. And I would imagine that most coal mines that supply some sort of coal, coking coal, would be likely to come within that definition. And I'm now just going to go through the sections itself. Sorry, my role tonight is just very briefly to give an overview. Brian and Ellen will be taking you through the analysis, but so I'm just going to talk about the sections themselves now. So the first section is section 79, and obviously it makes it an offence to be present on land or premises or in an enclosure where critical electricity infrastructure is situated, knowing that you don't have the authority to be in those premises. So there's a few things to note about that, and I think, and I will go into this a bit, the significant things about these new sections are how they compare to the sort of sections that covered this kind of behaviour before, that were in place beforehand and are still in place in relation to other sort of similar protest-related activities that don't relate to to coal mines or power stations. So the first thing to note is that you only need to be present on the premises to be found in breach of this provision. You don't need to be in the vicinity of the infrastructure, you don't need to be placing yourself or anybody in danger or obstructing anything, you just need to be in the premises broadly. And the premises, I assume, is just like the area of land where the coal mine or the power station is situated, so that's quite broad. also interesting to note is the penalty is up to imprisonment for 1 year, and then the equivalent maximum fine for that is $14,000. So they're quite serious penalties for just being somewhere where you're not authorised to be. It's also worth noting that the only mental element required is that you know that you're not authorised to be there, and there's what I think is a significant departure from the ordinary laws in relation to trespass that would have applied before these sections were introduced, is that the old provisions, and these are contained in the Summary Offences Act, they have a series of statutory defences which you can rely on, so you might be able to raise an argument so that you're not guilty of the offence if any of these defences apply. And the defences in the Summary Offences Act include that you had lawful authority to be there, that you had a legitimate excuse, so if there was some sort of emergency, and they also require that you willfully enter the private property knowing that you're not meant to be there. Some trespass provisions as well in the Summary Offences Act require you to disobey a warning or a request to leave the premises. So there's a few more boxes that you have to tick basically to be found guilty of the trespass offences under the Summary Offences Act, as opposed to being found guilty of breaching Section 79. The other thing to note about the offences in the Summary Offences Act is that the maximum penalties are halved. So the maximum penalty under the Summary Offences Act is imprisonment for 1 year. It probably is worth noting that the statutory defences, broadly speaking, have been tried, that would apply under the Summary Offences Act, have been tried in previous cases relating to protests in Australia without much success. They have been applied successfully in the UK. In one case, they argued that they had a reasonable excuse to go and do property damage to a coal-fired power station on the basis that there's a climate emergency taking place. But that was a jury trial, which I think is what makes that particular case distinctive. Those sorts of arguments have been not run in relation to a climate case, but have been run in relation to other protest cases without much success in Australia. So although the actual legislation is quite different, I'm not sure that the practical effects of that is very significant. But again, Brian and Ellen would know more about that, and they might be able to comment on that in more detail. The second offence that was introduced into the Act is Section 80, which makes it unlawful or illegal to tamper, damage, interfere, and so that's basically any plant, equipment or vehicles that is associated with electricity infrastructure, so it can be off-site, such as a pipe connecting relevant facilities, and also anything on that premises, so it goes back to that broadly defined premises. The maximum penalty for this offence is 2 years or an equivalent fine of $28,000. So again, the maximum penalties are quite serious. This penalty actually does require you to be reckless as to whether or not your actions will interfere with the production of electricity. So it does actually have some mental element. You have to be obviously reckless as to the impacts of your actions. So that's Section 80. As far as I'm aware, and I'm pretty sure this is the case, nobody has been charged under these provisions since they've been introduced. So it's, again, they haven't been tested in court. It's difficult to see how the maximum penalties will be applied, and whether the courts are likely to adopt an approach where they will penalise people with the potentially very serious penalties that are available under the Act. I suppose the legislation itself does, by making the penalties more serious than what would have previously applied under the Summary Offences Act, that does evince a parliamentary intention that these interference or being on critical infrastructure premises are intended to be treated more seriously than property damage or trespass offences under the other acts. But as I've said, there's no case law on that, so that's speculation at this stage. And I might now pass it to Brian.